Good evening and welcome to the Modise Network. Tonight, Afriforum Deputy CEO Ernst Roets and Labour analyst Terry Bell take on the heated topic of white privilege and ask, does it exist? And how do we dismantle structural inequality in South Africa? Later on, former Bafana Bafana defender Mark Fish and award-winning football commentator Baba Mtetwa join me on the couch as we take a look at football in South Africa. I'm Tim Modise and thank you for joining me this evening. The DA leader Mmusi Maimane added fuel to the fire in the racism and white privilege debate a few months back when he suggested that historical white privilege had to be acknowledged and that black exclusion from the economy also had to be prioritized. And many members of his party were upset about this, and Labour analyst Terry Bell came to his defense, saying it was a perfectly logical comment to make about the situation in South Africa at the moment. But there are people who hold a different view, such as Afriforum, who say, if anything, it is white people who are being discriminated against in current-day South Africa. Terry Bell joins me from Cape Town studios, and Ernst Roets is here with me in Joburg. And gentlemen, good evening to you. Welcome. Welcome, Terry. You said in response to what Mmusi Maimane said and the reaction to his comments that it made perfectly logical sense what he had to say. Why do you think that there were members of the Democratic Alliance who did not agree with the way he was framing the challenge at the moment?
Well, I think the point is that you do have a lot of people who are discovering that they have to come to terms with reality. And reality is, quite simply, that we have a legacy of white privilege, which is a generational thing. You'll find many of the born-free so-called group who will say, look, I've worked hard, I got all these qualifications, I haven't been able to qualify. I suggest anyone who is part of that former white group should read Clinton Chauke's Born in Chains, also a born free, he's only 23 years old, who has written this book, his memoir, and he grew up in a shack in Attridgeville. And then you'll see what I mean about the legacy that persists from the past. And it goes way back beyond 1948.
Now, let me ask you, Terry, because sometimes you can make assumptions about so-called white privilege, right? And think by virtue of a person being white, therefore that person is privileged. But we mean specific things here, which you mentioned from your own first-hand experience as a white South African, that there are certain privileges that you enjoyed in the past that continue with you up to this moment. What do we mean? What is your understanding of that?
Well, what it means quite simply is that you had a situation, a class society, which was also divided by, shall we say, caste. So if you were part of the white community, you had a fantastic advantage as a family right across the board. I mean, my father was a member of the Labour Party who went along with that notorious slogan, workers of the world.
with apartheid and that there were human rights violations. I think it's very sad for Terry to argue in such a way, to try to put words in my mouth, to try to accuse me of things I've never said. I've never argued anything that could remotely be interpreted as a form of white supremacy.
But
I'm pointing out the flaws in the system and why the current system is not working.
Well, obviously,
he wants to take us back to 1912.
Terry, you're taking us back to 1912 now when we try to...
If you want to say... No. If he wants to say that I am saying, that white supremacy, if he talks about whites being discriminated against, they're not being discriminated against. People, young people are being discriminated against. It makes no difference what their color background is. Have a look at the unemployment rate. If you're going to talk in racial terms, which Afriforum does, they're not a civil rights group, they're an ethnic minority group, a narrow nationalist group. If you want to look at that, look at the unemployment rate for so-called white youth, which is about 7 or 8%. Look at the unemployment rate for black youth, which is over 35%.
Yes.
Yeah, well, Ernst, how do you respond to that? Because I suppose what people are looking for is for a group such as Afriforum, for instance, to acknowledge that indeed there were privileges for the white community in the past that give them the advantages they have today, and given that type of history, that the time has come now to prioritize the exclusion and poverty levels in the black community.
Well, it's called a non sequitur. There's a logical leap in, it is argued this and this happened, and then it is argued this and this is what's currently happening, but the argument isn't made, it isn't explained why this is the reason for this. Why is A the reason for B? I can tell you why it's not, because there's a lot of things that's currently happening in South Africa that is ensuring that black people remain poor. The fact that 80% of schools in this country are dysfunctional. The fact that, according to Statistics South Africa, schools that are mostly attended by white people, teachers teach on average 6.5 hours in those schools per day. In black schools, black teachers in black schools teach 3 to 3.5 hours on average per day. We can go down the list. The way that the education system is dysfunctional, the way black people are being made dependent of the South African government through policies such as affirmative action and the way it's being implemented. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a policy to address this. I'm saying the way the current policy is being implemented. All of these things are current realities. The fact that black children don't get textbooks, the fact that 9 out of 10 white children grow up in households with both their parents as opposed to 3 out of 10 black children. And studies have shown that that has a massive impact on your chances of success. Those are the current realities, and these are the realities that we should deal with. We can talk about 1912 and what happened in the 1800s and what happened 300 years ago, but that does not do anything to solve the current crisis that we are facing.
Okay, Terry, brief response from you.
I would agree entirely. We're on the same. We're on the same page there. I didn't say that I did not support what needs to be done. What I say is we need to understand the roots of the past in order to be able to understand where we are at present and where we need to go in the future.
Sure.
I have no truck with the way the education system's been run, with the levels of corruption, etc. However, this situation, which at a time of a global economic crisis, leads to it promotes charlatans of all kinds, political, religious, etc., who latch onto this and in this instance, use the fact that you have a so-called black government that is failing. It's not that it's a government that is failing, it's a system that is failing, and we need to look at the system and understand the class nature of that system.
I'm pleased. We're analyzing the past and the history the way that we have, but focusing on what's going on currently and moving forward, there seems to be some agreement there. We'll probe that in a moment when we come back.